tells his disciples a parable. He told them many parables. This is one. The kingdom of heaven is like this. A man takes a mustard seed and sows it in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it grows up, it is the biggest of all plants. It becomes a tree so that birds come and make their nests in its branches. The mustard seeds, I've got a collection of mustard seeds right here. In this small jar, there are hundreds of mustard seeds. I was speaking with Calwick earlier this year. I believe you were preaching on this very text, and you went to Amazon.com and ordered mustard seeds. And I believe you said that you can't buy just a few. They're so small.
10,000 seeds for $8.99.
10,000 seeds for $8.99. I challenge you to go and try and buy anywhere a mustard seed. It's hard. Most seeds come in packets, but these are so small, of course, that they come 10,000 at a time. It's small, like many seeds, as you know, and it's very easily spread. And it's really self-contained. The seed's got everything it needs, except it needs to be spread, right? It needs to rely on birds or animals or someone to cast the seed. Otherwise, it never does anything. And it relies on rain and relies on sun for it to become that great mustard tree. So the theme of this convention is sowing and tending and sharing. Something I introduced last year in this very same address. A way to help us as a diocese, as faithful people of God, to remember the entire scope of work that is before us. So I spoke about sowing, tending, and sharing. And I pointed out then, and I want to remind us now that this is not a new project or something like that we're unveiling the rollout of sowing and tending and sharing. And that we want to see this project rolled out at a parish near you. That's not the point. What this is a reminder. A reminder that when we think of sowing seeds as Christ calls us to do, we think of spreading the kingdom of God. We think of it like a garden. That in order for a garden to grow, that we've got to plant those seeds. I know you remember this from last year. I know you do. And so we talked about sowing, tending, and sharing, that the seeds are planted, and then they must be tended, they must be watered, they must be nurtured so that they grow. The weeds have to be pulled up. We have to make sure there's plenty of sun. And then once the garden has grown, then we love to share the harvest. We want to share the harvest as Christians. So when we think about this work, this kingdom-building work that we are about, if we think of it as a kingdom, as a garden, as Jesus so often did, then we're reminded that we've got to sow those seeds, tend them, and share them. It's meant, I offer this as a way, again, to remind us of a big picture, to approach all that we're doing. Because often, as I mentioned last year, we have forgotten, not often, but almost always, we've forgotten in our past to sow. We have focused a great deal on tending the garden, the church, and that it's necessary and important to tend to our common life, what we're doing here right now, assembling and getting to know one another and voting for offices. This is all tending, and it's all good, and good order of the church is necessary for the church to continue. And so we've been pretty good at tending for a very long time and for sharing our harvest with the rest of the world. But the image there is to help us remember to get those seeds out there, for us to be sowers ourselves. So here's another way to think about it. Instead of a garden, let's say we think of it as let's say we're going to make a stew. You like stew? Yeah, I like stew. And so if you've ever seen a cooking show, you know that at least the old cooking shows, that you have a camera over the stove, and the chef comes out and says, "I'm going to make this fabulous stew. This is a dish that I grew up with, and it's got meat and vegetables and rice, and maybe it's a jambalaya, maybe that they're making." And so the chef tells you all about it and comes to the stove and starts to put the ingredients in. And have you ever noticed how all those ingredients are already there prepared? That chef didn't go to the grocery store, right? The salt that is needed is right there in that nice little ramekin, and she can just go, boop, drop it right in. And the onions have been already cut up and thrown, right? And all you have to do is throw it in and stir it up and you watch it cook. Somebody prepared all of those ingredients. So imagine if you could go home and have dinner, everything already measured out, you just throw it in the pot. So wouldn't that be great? I mean, and you can actually. You can go to Blue Apron, right? You can go to HelloFresh and you can order, and they will send you in a box all the ingredients. And you don't even have to wash the lettuce. You don't have to cut up the onion. It's already done. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Wow, wouldn't that be great if the church were like that? If you came to church and all the ingredients for your growth were already there. That somebody had gone and found it and just cut up all those people and put them in the pot. Okay, that's not what I meant. All right, so the metaphor is not exactly working completely. But that's kind of the way we approached it for so long, is that we just assumed the ingredients for the next wave of the church, for the future of the church, were just going to come and set themselves up on our table. So all we had to do was maybe stir them up a little. Right? We were taught that. And it's the way the church has been structured. Because we lived in a culture when that's exactly what happened. If everybody has to be Christian, the only decision is you pick your flavor, because you have to go to church. And so we could assume that people were going to come. It's not a good assumption. And we can't assume that anymore, and it hurts. But I tell you, it's good for the church. But there's no Blue Apron out there. There is no fresh HelloFresh that is going to simply drop growth into our laps. Are you with me? So whether you want to think of it as a stew that we are making for the kingdom of God, the kingdom of God, Jesus said, is like a stew. Well, he never said that. And probably for good reason. But he liked to talk about gardens, so we're going to stick to gardens. So you can pick the metaphor that you want to use, whether you can be sowing, tending, and sharing as a way to remind us we've got to sow seeds as well as tend and share. Maybe those three words don't work for you. Maybe you'd like sowing, growing, and going. How about that? Hey, sowing, growing, and going. Or you could plow, plant, prune, and pluck. That's stretching a little bit, right? Or maybe throw it, hoe it, and show it. Right? Throwing the seeds, hoeing the ground, showing to the rest of the world. My point, my brothers and sisters, please don't leave. Please lie. Pick your metaphor. I'm not in love. Sowing, tending, and sharing, again, is to remind us that we've got to do it all. We're in an age where we simply cannot assume the seeds are going to plant themselves. Frankly, we can never, should have let ourselves, as the people of Jesus Christ, get in that place to begin with. So, I want to talk a little bit about the work that we collectively as a church have done in 2019 and are looking to do in 2020. I'll continue to think of it as sowing and tending and sharing because it's helpful to make sure that are we looking across the breadth of our work to do it all. But I talk about it as our common work because it is, as you know, it's a misnomer to talk about work that the diocese does as if it's some other entity. The diocese is represented in this room, but it's all of us. And so the work that we are doing, sowing, tending, and sharing really is happening at each and every parish represented in this room every day of the year. But there are some things that we do collectively. As far as sowing for this past year, we have invested a great deal of time and energy and effort. Because frankly, we're way behind. We, the church, are way behind. We're looking to reclaim an urgency that the church has given away, an urgency around evangelism, a necessity around sharing, and a joy that comes from sharing good news. So we rolled out very steadily this past year a toolkit to help us with our sewing. It's a set of tools because so many of us were just not taught how to do this. So we've rolled out Invite, Welcome, Connect, right? I know you guys know about this as a way to help us do that evangelical work. The November conference was incredibly well attended. I've forgotten the exact number, I didn't get it before, but it doesn't matter. There are a ton of us here, a ton of us there. But there's a lead up to it that I found as exciting as anything. The multiple videos that were out, the response back that we got from people, the communion articles, and the enthusiasm around invitation that I see each and every Sunday when I'm in your parishes. Each and every Sunday, I talk about Invite, Welcome, Connect with the clergy and lay leadership. I've done it at your parish, haven't I? We do it every time to emphasize the importance of this work in this age. In 2020, we're starting a lead team of lay members, folks who are at the last conference who signed up to take their leadership role in this work. And also in 2020, we've got money in the budget for seed grants. So that if your parish has a crazy idea for something, some evangelism, that you're going to have an incredibly simple form to fill out, and the money's coming to you. We're talking $500, something in that ballpark. You think of the $250 grant that we were surprised with last year that you had. Think of it like that. But that the diocesan council's budget includes seed grants to spark. Because you might not know here on January the 25th exactly what you want to do in April, but when that idea comes in April, you should have a place to get money easily. In Delaware, we are blessed for a diocese as small as we are, that we have resources available to us. We might not be the richest diocese in the country, but we're certainly not the poorest. And we can be very thankful for the generations of people that have come before us and left great gifts that empower us even today to do good things. So I often say that it's not money that we lack, it's leadership. And when that spark of leadership happens, then you need to know that the diocesan council wants to get money in your hands. How do you like hearing that? I'd like to say that again. Because I think there's a shock. But it shouldn't be. Council, the budget, wants to get the money into your hands to do the work, for you to be creative and try things, take risks. So the seed grants will roll out in the spring. Another thing around sowing, spreading the good news we've been doing for decades here, and that's Camp Arrowhead. And I don't know if you know, you'll hear their presentation tomorrow, but they had another exceptional year. We talk about youth ministry in the diocese and sometimes lament how it doesn't always feel like now in this age like it did at some time in the past at individual parishes, and I understand the changes that are going on. But let us never forget that we are doing profound, life-changing ministry at Arrowhead every summer for the campers and for the staff and for the parents, the families that interact with that place. Never think for a moment that that's just camp. That's transformation going on there. They saw facility improvements. The capital campaign is really hitting its stride. You'll hear more about that tomorrow. Also around growth, around vitality, the clergy continuing our growth and vitality meetings our gatherings that began back in 2018. I've offered personally 3 growth and vitality workshops for parishes where I've come and spent a Saturday talking about the nature of vitality and what it means for a parish to grow. And I've got 3 more on the books here in 2020. If your parish is interested in this, let me know. But I'll be calling you soon enough. But don't wait. Our communications team at the mission support staff has helped multiple parishes on site. Cindy has gone on site to help parishes rework their website. It's a help. As you well know, most people look at your website multiple times before they ever cross the threshold of the church. And our websites are one of our fundamental evangelical tools that we tend to underutilize. So all this necessary, it's important focus on sowing this before us. We cannot neglect to tend to what it is that we have that we have been doing to tend to what is planting and tend to what must be done. Feeding and watering, strengthening and nurturing the garden as it is growing. A couple of things to highlight. In the past year, Diocesan Council has started 3 different task forces. Members of council, and they focused on 3 particular questions that were chosen only because they kept bubbling up over and over. They just kept coming up time and again. The first one is looking to decide around a handful of properties that are owned by council. What best to do with them? Owning property is not council's forte. It's not really what it got in the business of doing. But over time, just by circumstance, council has property. So they've got a task force of people looking to see what best to do with these, help manage these properties. The second is a question around the current practice of parish acceptances. That is the dollars that are given from parishes to diocesan council for the shared work of all of us. And the question is, are those expectations clear? And are they fair? Council wants to know, I do too. It's a good question. I think many of you have the very same question. And the third is the governance structure of Camp Arrowhead. The camp is thriving now, as I described, and it is poised for an incredibly strong future. The capital campaign is set up to do just that. But is the way that council is overseeing camp right now, which is fine, could it be better for camp in the best interest of camp? So those are 3 task forces that are going on. Pretty exciting stuff, right? It's not exciting, but it's important. And I commend council for the work that they're doing. There's no particular deadlines the council set for itself other than to do the work, to report back to itself, and as things are better understood, then to begin to report to the diocese. This year we'll host 2 small church conferences for the first time. The first to be in Lower Delaware on Saturday, May the 9th, and the second one for churches in Upper Delaware, the date to be decided. It's a small church conference. If you think you are small, then you are invited to this church, to this conference. And it's to remind us that small is simply a word that describes size. It does not mean bad, it does not mean stunted, it does not mean incomplete. It's a description of size, not necessarily of vitality, not of vitality. And so as a conference, it's a building on the growth and vitality workshops that I've done individually, but now to do some of this work collectively as small churches. To look and see what the common causes are, the common challenges that small churches face. To understand the realities that are out there around clergy employment, around budgets. And to share the strengths and the resources and the ideas. I hear you, small churches. I hear you each and every Sunday. That you're vital and you're excited about the work that you're doing, but boy, you'd like some help. Because it's tough. It's tough for small churches, it's tough for large churches. It's a different world in which we minister. We're all looking for tools and for help. And the conferences are a step to help getting us working together towards that end. And the expectation would be that these would be annual gatherings. And around attending too, I highlight the work of the Commission on Ministry under John Humphrey's able leadership. We've rolled out a new process for discernment of holy orders just this month. But as exciting and as important as that is, raising up the next generation of ordained leaders, what is even more exciting still is the work that the Commission is also doing around the discernment of lay baptized calling. Because the Commission on Ministry believes, and I could not agree more, that every single person in this room should have access to discernment for your vocation, and not for that to be assumed that you're going to be ordained. That whatever calling is in your life, whatever you feel called to do, whatever the transition moment may be in your life, that you know that the Commission on Ministry, that this diocese can be a resource for you. That's pretty exciting. And it's unusual. And I commend the Commission for taking that charge. So with all this focus on sowing and on tending what's planned, we cannot forget to share from the abundance of our harvest. I'm pleased that in this work in the last few years of talking about evangelism and speaking about sowing, that the diocese has embraced this, and no one has come up to me yet and said, you know what, I'm really kind of tired of that. We need to make sure that we don't forget to feed the poor. Because you're right, we don't ever want to forget to feed the poor. But no one has come and tried to make a comparison to suggest that doing one means we're not going to do the other. And I commend you for that. Because what I was told, that when I focused on evangelism, I was told that people wouldn't listen to me. And that what they would do instead would be to returning to our old habits. Even our best habits, when they're good habits. Just old doesn't mean bad. But our habits focusing on outreach and mission, which we must continue to do. But don't let anyone try and suggest to you that evangelism somehow diminishes our ability. Do you see the fallacy in that? Evangelism enhances our ability to be present in the world, to listen to the world, and to help it. So I commend you, folks. We continue to share our harvest with the world in 1,000 million ways in your parishes, but also collectively. We hosted Delaware Lessons and Carols for the first time. Here's one small example. At Brandywine Collaborative, and next year will be at Christ Church Dover, where the choir school, the Cathedral Choir School, which has a long and rich association with this diocese, sang lessons and carols. And it's a great celebration of our collective, of our history and our collective mission now. And it's a great thing for you to invite someone to, for people who may not be interested in going to church. It's a great invitation piece. We've begun an initiative to help diocesan organizations and then eventually anyone who's interested find and identify and locate local food sources, people who want to buy locally to be able to do that. We're on the very front end of beginning to provide stewardship help for parishes. We had a parishioner come to me and say, Bishop, I would be very interested in helping people with stewardship. It's something I've done, it's something I think I'm pretty good at. Do you think parishes would be interested in the help? And I said yes. And so she has presented, Helen Spence has presented at Diocesan Council and met with very enthusiastic reviews. And so Helen's on the front end of that work, of helping parishes with stewardship. You'll see tomorrow that a number of Delawareans went to the southern border serving asylum seekers. And I give thanks to Alice and Nina and Mark for their work, sparked by a call to action, a real desire to be present with asylum seekers, to work there, to listen, and to be present. We've started Hispanic ministries in Georgetown. A group of folks have went, instead of going in and saying we're going to plant a church or we're going to do X or Y or Z, went into the community and began simply by getting to know leaders and members of the Georgetown community, Hispanic community, led by Leanne Walling and Deacon Chris Miller Marson. Basically, they're there and asking Hispanic leaders, what is it that you need and how can we help? And so what bubbled up, the real demand said, what we really need is ESL, English as a Second Language class, but we have some of those, but what we really need is one that is targeted for moms, that would provide some daycare for their kids so they could come and actually have a place for their kids, and that it would be in the daytime, which would work better as well. And so partnering with Dell Tech, who's supplying all the computer hardware and a good chunk of change, and the local council, and the good folks at St. Paul's in Georgetown who are providing the space, it's happening. It's happening. These and 1,000 other things are happening at your parishes across Delaware as we share this harvest that we have been given to tend. So whether you call it sowing, tending, and sharing, throw it, hoe it, and show it, whatever your favorite way of remembering, whether you're in a parish or a school, you're at Camp Arrowhead, a memorial house, remember that we must remember that sowing is as important as anything else that we do. Sowing is as important, and even though we have not been taught it, that does not mean we cannot learn it and teach it to the next generation. If you think of the parable of the sower, another of Jesus' parables involving agriculture, instead of simply talking about one mustard seed, Jesus spoke about the sower who went and threw seeds with wild abandon. Those words aren't in there, but that's exactly what the sower did. The sower went and threw seeds everywhere. The sower didn't just look for the one little plot of ground where he or she was sure they were going to take root. The sower threw seeds everywhere. Some fell on the rocky path, and what happened? The birds ate them up. Some fell down, and the soil was too thin, and the roots couldn't grow, so the sun scorched. And some fell among thorns, and they grew, but then they got choked off, right? But the sower kept sowing. The sower kept sowing. And that's what I take away from that parable, is to keep casting it wide. Throw it wide, my brothers and sisters, the good news that is within you. And as you sow, listen to the good news in the people you encounter. Our job is to not go out and make them like us. Can I get an amen? Amen. When we sow seeds, it's not to turn them all into our little stew for us to consume, but it's to share the kingdom of God. I'm proud of the work we've done, my friends, in 2019. 2020 is going to be great. Man, can't you just wait for 2030, 2040, 2050? This is long-term kingdom building. And so I say this to you, that as you think about your own budgets and your own plans, don't think so much about 2020. You got to. You got to pay the bills. You got to balance the budget. But be thinking about 30-30. Be thinking about 30 or 20. We'll all be dead, right? 30-30. If you'll open your clergy guide to page 700. Keep a long-term vision in place. When you are growing, when you are talking about evangelism, don't be thinking that we're trying to grow this and you're worried about how the growth is going to look in 2020 and 2021. You should be building things about growth. You're starting to see trends, but the numbers will come in 24 and 25. I've given you permission to be focused on growth, but not be so worried that you're not seeing it right now. This is kingdom building stuff. And just like the poem that you read, or the prayer that you read, attributed to Oscar Romero, the seeds we sow seeds that others will harvest. And when it comes to evangelism, remember that as you cast those seeds wide, that you're probably not going to be the one to harvest them. Rejoice that Christ will. Rejoice, my brothers and sisters. I say rejoice. Amen. Amen.